When it comes to Final Fantasy, one of the things that always draws me towards playing a game is its story, and in today's video I'm going to be sharing my tier list of the mainline series and which story is the best. Now remember, these are my opinions. You do not have to agree with them. I'm hoping we can create a bit of a discussion here. I give you my opinions, you give me your opinions, and we can just debate back and forth. But my opinion's always right, okay? No. I'm kidding. I'm hoping we can have a good time here. So with that all being said, what is up guys? Jen here. Hope you're all doing well. Welcome back to the channel. As always, got you covered with timestamps. So if you want to skip to any part of this tier list or go straight to the end and not have context, you can feel free to do that. Just don't comment in the comment section below saying I disagree with you when you don't know my reasons behind it. Also, if you like the content, please support the channel, hit that like button, and if you want to see more content like this, please consider hitting that subscribe button. So we're going to switch to the tier list here, and these are all muddled up. There's a few extras here. We're going to only be concentrating on 1 through to 16, and we're not going to go through any of the sequels, any of the spin-offs, or whatever might be here. When it comes to 14, I'm just going to try my best to do 14 as a whole, but we'll see how that goes. So we're going to dive straight into Final Fantasy I. And Final Fantasy I's story is very basic, right? It's just literally A to B, save the world from chaos. But it does get interesting when you find out that it's a time loop. I think when it comes to it, as a whole, when you're rating it, ranking it as a story, like, oh man, I want to tell this story to my children one day, I think it's just probably, I'm going to put it in C tier. I think C tier is probably the best place for it to go because it's not anything kind of revolutionary. I look back at it and I'm thinking, oh, is there anything there? But the story, it's a nice little story with a little bit of time travel in there. So Final Fantasy II, when it comes to Final Fantasy II has a bit more of a story, it has more developed characters and a bit more stakes. The Empire's taking over and essentially we're this rebel group that wanting to do, and then we dive into all these trials and tribulations and oh my god, Leon is on the bad side, please come back to us. It has a lot to it. So in that regard, I think it goes higher than 1. Because it adds more story, but there's not a captivating story there. Once you sift through all the keywords and do all of that and kind of see the storyline at its basis, I think it's just a classic rebel faction going after the Empire, but obviously with more fantasy elements and more at stake. So that's a B from me. Final Fantasy III, I don't know if I should go off the DS version here or if I should go off like the Pixel Remaster version, which is essentially the NES version. So there's not much to the story. I can't even remember the story. I just know Crystal Tower, Cloud of Darkness, and I know Sid airships. And I know the names of the characters in 3 in the DS version, but apart from that, it's not very memorable to me. So I think I'm going to throw this in D. I think I'm going to throw it in D, because to me, it doesn't seem to be hitting on all cylinders. Now, as we go further now, when we go to Final Fantasy IV, the stories are going to start to get a bit more in depth and we're going to have a bit more of a discussion here. So Final Fantasy IV, a lot of characters, a good story here, a redemption arc for Cecil, becoming a paladin. The only problem, and I've stated this in the past, when it comes to Final Fantasy IV, is its cop-outs with its deaths. I think the deaths, when it happens, is memorable. It's like, oh man, I can't believe we've lost that character. But when it happens 4 times and then all those characters come back to life, it's like, oh, do you really need to be doing that? Like when the twins got turned to stone and then you see them towards the end of the game rallying on from the distance. It's just like, really? But at its core, I really do enjoy like the story between Cecil and Kain. I like Rydia's backstory. It's just the deaths that throw me off. So I think what I'm going to do with 4 is I'm going to put it in A. The deaths really throw me off though, so it's going to be a high B. I'm changing it. It's going to be a high B. The deaths, the cop-outs really throw me off, but at its core, it is a good story. But I think for that, it brings it down just a little bit for me. Now, Final Fantasy V is one of my favorite games to play, but it certainly does have the weaker story. It brings us to some memorable characters like Gilgamesh, and we get Omega and Exdeath. Galuf is always a pleasure, but it did explore some elements in the story as well, which were nice to see. But if I was to be honest, the story just isn't the strong point of 5. I always feel 5 has always been about its gameplay, its job system. So I'm going to keep it in B. I'm going to put it below 4. Below 4, come on. There we go. I think I might, I'm being a bit indecisive here. Should it go lower? No, it's gonna stay there. So let's move on to Final Fantasy VI. And a lot of people consider Final Fantasy VI to be the greatest Final Fantasy of all time. I'm not in that boat, and I don't bash anyone that is in that boat. It's all right to have difference of opinions, right? But when it comes to its story is very strong. Like, I like the whole end of the world actually happening and exploring the depth of these characters. I really like Celeste. I really like Locke. Terra's story's okay. There's other characters I'm probably missing. We've got the brothers, Sabin and Edgar, and just the way the kingdom, the fall of that kingdom, and coming back through all of the ashes and stuff like that. There's a lot to offer here. We've also got Cyan, we've got Shadow. The more I talk about it, the characters are very strong, but does it support the overarching story? I think it does, because Kefka is one of those antagonists that wins and becomes more insane as the game comes on. I think the more I'm talking about it, the more I'm digging it, because I was thinking like A, but I'm thinking like the story for 6, I think it might be an S for me personally. The more I'm talking about it, the more I'm thinking, you know what, the story is pretty damn cool. There's just a lot to it. There's a lot of characters and a lot of things to explore, but I guess that kind of adds to it. So yeah, Final Fantasy VI is going in S tier. Final Fantasy VII, my favorite Final Fantasy, my first Final Fantasy, and I will die on that hill. I think nostalgia plays a lot into that. I can admit that, because I was a child. Good times back then when I first played it. Every time I think back playing it for the first time, nothing but goodness. But the story, I love the story to Final Fantasy VII. I like the whole arc. I like Cloud's just mental struggles that we get throughout the game and as they get stronger. I like all the other aspects that other characters offer, like Barrett. When he starts off, he's all like, come on, newcomer, follow me. And then as we get more and we discover his backstory, we get introduced to Marlene, and then we meet Dyne. There's so many aspects, but I guess we're talking about the overarching story, right? I keep going into like character things here, but the overarching story of Sephiroth just on a warpath, summoning Meteor, the story of Cloud and the identity crisis and realizing who he is, I think is a really strong story for me. And I need to stop making the mistake of, do the character arcs add to the overall story? I guess that's a question to throw in, because I feel like I'm doing a mistake here by diving into all of the character stories as well. But Final Fantasy VII ranks top for me. And that's a personal opinion, maybe a little bit nostalgia and just a bit biased there. But I'm willing to discuss. But we are now on to Final Fantasy VIII and the story of a soldier and time compression. I really like the story as it explores Squall's mental health. As someone that's experienced troubles of mental health in my lifetime, the more I've played this as I've gotten older, I've gone more to understand the story, and I really think 8 has a strong story. Yes, it gets a bit convoluted with all the time compression stuff, but I think overall it is a strong story. It's a love story between Squall and Rinoa. It's a mental struggle story when it comes to Squall. It's a real sci-fi and out there story when it comes to its time compression. And I think it's quite exhilarating. And I'm going to give Final Fantasy VIII the A rank. Moving on to Final Fantasy IX, the place I'll return to someday. Recently played this one, so it's still kind of fresh on my mind. But the story of discovering, like, it kind of takes you through it, doesn't it? Like the mist taking over the world, and then realizing there's another world that Zidane comes from, and then obviously Princess Garnet / Dagger / Sarah's past. There's a lot there, and it kind of gives it you in layers. And obviously Vivi's story as well, that adds to the overall arc. I really like 9. I do like 9, but I don't think, for me personally, it's a very strong story. But though it does get me in the feels when it gets the whole "you're not alone" thing. I'm thinking about it, and I'm getting the emotions here. So, for that reason, I think 9's also probably gonna. Oh, you know what? 9 might be an S here. I'm going to put 9 in S. Yes, 9 is going in S. Okay, Final Fantasy X. Listen to my story. This may be our last chance, and my last chance to win you guys over if I've really done really bad opinions. But Final Fantasy X is a good story. I like the perspective of Tidus, Tudus, whatever you want to call him. I like the fact that he's in the same boat that we are on. We're in this new world and we're exploring it alongside him. And then we get to the part of the game where he discovers it's a dream, and the dream will fade after Sin has been beaten. We won't talk about 10-2 in this at all because I wanted to look at 10 as just as its own story, and I think everyone should do that when it comes to the story of 10. I really get the motions every time I watch the ending to 10. So 10's pretty strong for me, and I'm going to put 10 story in S tier. I'm going to put 10 in, yeah, I'm going to do it. Now, Final Fantasy XI, I've never played, so I'm not going to rank that. So we're going to move straight on to Final Fantasy XII. This is the most recent game that I've got the Platinum Trophy on, so the story's still fresh. The story's very like Empire based, much like Final Fantasy II to certain extents. The Empire just turned bad. Need to try and sort them out, basically. It's really, really weak of a story, to be fair. They don't do a good job with the characters. It's okay. It really is okay at its core, but I think it just doesn't execute as well as it should. So I'm gonna put it in high. Oh, I'm gonna put it in high C. If I can do that, if it lets me. Let's move 2 back. There we go. It's in high C for 12. So Final Fantasy XIII, the story of Cocoon and Pulse, and the story of Lightning. It's been a while that I've played Final Fantasy XIII, so it's not as fresh in my mind as I would like it to be. It's the reason why I wanted to do tier lists alongside the Platinum series. But I think the story of 13 is pretty alright. Trying to remember, there's not very memorable things. This is why I really wanted to do something recent, because I might bash it when I shouldn't be bashing it. But I think it's a B. I think it's a good B. I think it's going to go below 4 for me here. Final Fantasy XIV, and I'm sorry that I didn't go into too depth with 13. It's just so because 13 I've not played in such a long time. I'm struggling remembering the story beats, but I remember just like the journey and the Foul Sea shenanigans was a good time, I think. Final Fantasy XIV then, and I'm going to try to rank this as a whole, and I don't want to go into too much detail. I'm trying to nutshell this as best as I can. But I've enjoyed my story playthrough of 14. It's been very casual, not been diving too much into it. I do like the lore. I like the payoff that we got in Endwalker. Shadowbringers was a treat. Dawn Trail I enjoyed as a new adventure. So I think what I'm going to do, just because of how much hours and time and investment I've put into 14 and its story, this is 14 as a whole. I'm not going to do each expansion. It's going to go in A for me, because it's kept me going playing that game. So that is good in my book. Final Fantasy 15. Oh man, the bros. I really like Final Fantasy 15. It took me a while to get on with Final Fantasy 15, but after like playing the Royal Edition and really just involving myself in there, I wish there was more. There's so much they missed out with story, but with the episodes, it's a very strong contender, and it's in an A for me. And then that means we are finishing off with Final Fantasy XVI, the latest entry in the series here. And I have reviews on the channel. I have praised the story of 16. I know that 16 isn't everyone's boat, but it really is a great story, and it is going in S for me. I loved the story of 16. I loved the characters of 16. I love how exhilarating 16 was. And I don't think it's quite 10 for me, but it's there. It is there. And there we have it. Above my head here is the tier list for the stories of the mainline Final Fantasy series. Do you agree with that? You probably don't, but I would love to hear your discussion. I'm going to try and do a few more tier lists here and there to kind of create the discussion, because I love talking anything and everything Final Fantasy. So I'm hoping you can join me for that one. So that's me. I hope you've enjoyed the video. If you have, leave a like. It supports the channel. If you want to see more content, hit the subscribe button. That also helps out considerably. I thank you for watching, and until next time, I'll catch you on the flip side.